Hello, and welcome to Sobercast. We provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast format. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into the virtual basket. Also, if you're a member of NA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, NAPOD. NAPOD features NA speakers and workshops in the same format as Sobercast. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for NAPOD, N-A-P-O-D, all one word, on any podcast player app, or go to napod.xyz if you'd like to listen online. Hope you enjoy the podcast and have a great day.
Well, thank you very much. As you have already found out, I am Clarence S, and I am a recovered alcoholic. Thank you. You're all very, very kind. Last night, we were talking about a lot of the beginnings and things attended to the beginnings of AA. And I mentioned last night that today we would get into talking about the program. AA has grown so, and it's taken so many different directions since its inception, that I am very cognizant of the fact that a lot of people are having a hard time grasping this program because in so many places it has been so watered down it's hardly recognizable. That's not a criticism, that's an observation. And as far as I'm concerned, in AA, I am a fundamentalist. I came in a certain way, and I was very fortunate in that I came in the manner that I did, and under the tutelage and direction of the people who took charge of me when I arrived here. Because I was brought into this program with some absolutes, and I was taught that there are certain things that I should believe in and that I should stand for. And I was further taught that if you don't stand for something, you're very apt to fall for most anything. Last night I mentioned that while I was in the hospital, my sponsor, Doc Smith, put me on my knees and made me acknowledge that I believed in God. It was something of a threat, or at least I took it that way, but I took it. I was not one that was in a position to argue about anything, because I was washed out. And I see people come into AA today and they have an idea, or somebody gives them the idea that they can have choices on what they can do in this program. Well, you can have choices because we are people that have a will of our own. But I'll tell you one thing, we have a program of perfection here. And being alcoholics, one of the characteristics of the alcoholic is he is an extremist. He never does anything by halfway measures. When he works hard, he plays hard, and when he drinks, he makes a career out of it. And if we're going to recover from such a living, we'd better go into this with the extreme also. That would be my advice. I think I mentioned last night or sometime or other, I mentioned since I've been here, that alcoholism is probably the oldest malady that afflicts the human race. And we read about it in mythology, we read about it in ancient history, and we read about it in the Bible. Last night I mentioned that I would tell you a few Bible stories just to bring it to your attention that alcoholism has been with us a long, long time. Well, you know, when we open the Bible, we don't have to go any further than the first book of the Bible, book of Genesis, and we meet our first rummy. We meet our friend Noah. He was one of us. And I'll point out the reasons I believe this to be. The world got itself in a shape about the way it is now, everything going downhill, hell-bent for election. And God was doing everything he could to get people straightened out and get running straight in doing their thing. And he wasn't having much success with it. So he finally got fed up with the whole deal and decided to wipe the whole thing out and start all over again. So he determined that he would flood this world and everything in it. But he wanted some seed to start over new. So he went to his friend Noah. He says, Noah, my boy, he says, I want you should do something for me. And Noah, being a God-fearing man, he says, anything, Lord, what do you want me to do? He says, I want you to build a big boat, this ark. And he gave him the dimensions of this boat and told him that I want you to build that, and when you have completed it, I want you to put one or two of every living creature in that ark, and also your family, because I'm going to destroy the world, and I want some seed to start all over again. Noah says, I will do that. So Noah and his family got out there cutting logs and sawing wood and hammering and getting this ark put together, and it took them several years to do this. Well, of course, you know, when you're doing anything, people get curious. So the neighbors came by and said, what are you doing, Noah? Why, I'm building a boat. You're building a boat out here in the middle of the desert? Yeah. He says, what for? He says, we're going to have a flood, and everything's going to be washed away. Well, you can imagine what the neighbors had to say about this. They tapped their head. Poor old Noah, he's playing with a short deck. Poor Noah has lost some shingles off the roof. So they laughed at him and go on their way. So finally the ark was completed, and Noah got all these creatures in the ark and his family, and they closed the doors. And some of those neighbors, they saw this rain coming up, and that boy had rained and had rained for 40 days and 40 nights. Some of them were beating on the door, but the doors did not open for anyone. So the ark rose on this water and started floating around for a good long period of time. Finally, this ark, the waters began to recede, and the ark came down and settled on Mount Ararat. The ground came up, and everything was dry. And what was the first thing our friend Noah did? He ran out there, he planted a vineyard, he raised some grapes, he made some wine, and he got drunk. And boy, what a mess he made out of himself. Read that part of the book of Genesis, and you'll meet your first rummy in AA, in history. In the Bible, there are also a couple other good stories I like. There are several of them, but I'm going to tell you about a couple that I particularly enjoy. One of them is the story of the Good Samaritan. Boy, there's a rummy story for you. Picture this. This lad is lying over there on the side of the road, stark naked, all beat up and half dead. He don't have a stitch of clothes. Everything has been taken from him. He's lying there naked. And you know what happened to him, don't you? He got drunk and he got rolled. I don't know if any of you ever got rolled, but he did. So along came a priest, and he saw this man lying along the side of the road. And the priest, being a man of the world, he's seen drunks lying around before and rolled. So he looks at him and he says, like you hear today, you still hear the same thing today. Good enough for him. The dirty, stinking, drunken bum, he got himself in that condition, let him get himself out the best he can, and he crossed the way and let the poor guy lying there in his misery. So along came a Levite, and he saw this fellow there, And he's a man of the world, and he repeated the same thing that the priest had said. The dirty, stinking, drunken bum. He got himself in that shape, let him get himself out of it, and he passed on the other side and left him lying there. Along comes this Samaritan fellow, and he was a traveling salesman. I'll prove that to you. And he was, of course, the Samaritans were not the chosen people around there in that time, but he was there, and he came by in his former conveyance. It certainly wasn't a Chevrolet, it was probably a mule. And he sees this fellow lying there, and did he pass him by? Not by a jugful. He got down off of his conveyance, and what did he do? It tells you very plainly what he did. He gave him some wine. He gave him a drink. And he poured some wine in his wounds. And did he leave him lying there? Nope. He picked him up, put him on his former conveyance, and took him to the Holiday Inn. Well, it says he took him to an inn. And here's how I know they're all rummies. He goes to this inn, and he took this fellow and deposited him there, and he says to the innkeeper, "Mr. Innkeeper, take care of this fellow. And here is some money." You see, he gave the money to the innkeeper, not the drunk. He knew that much. And he says, "If there be any more due, I will repay you on my next visit through," which means he's a traveling salesman making that territory. There is a first 12-step call on record. It's right in the Bible. One other story I like in the Bible is a story of these two boys. The prodigal son. Boy, here is a rummy story par excellence. Here's these two kids. And they're Jewish kids. You want to keep this in mind. They're Jews. And they work for their dad. Their father has a big spread there, and he has cows and goats and sheep and everything, no hogs, but everything else he has there. And of course, in Jewish lore, why, the boys work for their father, and when the father passes away, of course, they inherit the estate and the property. They get the loot that the old man leaves. So these two kids are working out here on this farm for their father. And this one kid, the older one, boy, he does more than he's supposed to do. He's a worker. Boy, he's into everything, doing a lot more than his father expects him to do. He's the Al-Anon kid. But the other kid, the young one, guess who? This young one, he doesn't like working on that farm in the first place, and he wants his share of the loot right now. Do you ever hear it? Anybody here feel that way? He can't wait till tomorrow for it. He don't want to wait till some indefinite time when his father dies and he gets that loot. He's young, and he wants it when he can enjoy it. So he bugs his father and bugs his father and bugs his father for his share of the loot. Finally, the father can't take it anymore, and he says, "Okay, take your share and be gone with it." And boy, he did. So he took his share, and what does it say in the Bible? He says he went into a far country, and he squandered his substance in riotous living. Did you ever hear anything like that? He blew the whole bundle. The whole thing went. And he was tapped out, and he's flat, and he's broke. Now, that isn't the worst yet. He was in this foreign country, and they had a famine there. He couldn't get any work. He couldn't get anything to eat. He's about to starve to death, and the only surcease that he got a job where? Now, remember, this kid's a Jew. He got a job on a hog farm, taking care of a bunch of hogs. Did he eat what the hogs ate? No, sirree. It says in a good book he ate of the husks of the food that the hogs ate. He ate what the hogs wouldn't eat. This is what he ate. I'd say this kid pretty well hit his bottom, wouldn't you? So here's what he did, something very important he said, and it's the same thing that you and I had to say. It says he came to himself. He came to himself. And he said this. He says, "I starve. My Father has much. His servants have much. I am starving. Then he said this. He says, I will arise and go to my Father and tell him I'm unworthy. Okay, and I will serve as one of his servants. Remember that. This is what we had to do. So that kid got up off his duff and started that long trek home, defeated, sick, beaten, fearful, and he had to go to meet his father. Well, what happened when he got home? Did his father chew him out? No, siree. It says in there, his father saw him coming afar off down the road, and he ran to him, and he fell on his neck, and he kissed him. He says, my son, who is dead, is alive. He says, let us make merry. Put a ring on his finger, shoes on his feet, a cloak on his back. Let us go up and have a party. Let us kill the fatted calf and have a feast. So the kid's protesting that he isn't worthy of this, but the father assures him that he belongs to him, and he says, my son who is dead is alive. Let us have a celebration. So they go up the house, and boy, they're having a blast up there. The old music is going, they're singing and dancing, and they're eating and having a big old time. Meantime, this Al-Anon kid, he's still out there going at it, working away like a good Al-Anon should. And he hears all this ruckus up at the house, so a servant came by and said, hey, what's all that ruckus at the house, the music and all that noise going on up there? He says, haven't you heard? He says, heard what? He says, your brother came home. He says, oi, that dirty no good. So then he dropped his tools and went up to the house to confront his father. Now this is a very human thing. He says, Father, I have been a good son to you. I have always done more than is required of me. You had no problems with me, and I'm here working with you, but this no good brother of mine, you give him his share of the inheritance, and he squandered it all on wine, women, and song, and he comes back here, and you have a party for that dub. He says, Father, you never had a party for me. Isn't that human? So the father had to straighten him out. And he had to tell him what this was and the reason for it. It's a great story of the second chance, a great story of redemption, which you and I all have experienced coming to this fellowship. So that's a good rummy story. Well, anyway, so much for the Sunday school lesson. This thing of alcoholism is as old as time. And do you know that all down through history, there was never any solution for the alcoholic. As I mentioned the other night, he had two options. The alcoholic can go crazy or die or both. A little over 40 years ago, when Alcoholics Anonymous came into being, after all this thousands of years of history of alcoholics and millions of alcoholics stumbling across the face of this earth and dying in misery and what have you, and carrying a lot of people down with them, finally after this time, this program came into being, and the alcoholic got a third option. He can still go crazy, he can still die, but he can get well. And this was never in essence before. Never. You know, I think that God looked down on these rummies finally and saw what was going on after all these years. He says, I got to do something for those birds. And he got a bunch of people whom you would least expect to do anything, get them together, and here's what we have. Well, I'm forever thankful that I came along when I did. I was a complete washout. As I mentioned the other night, I was on the bum for quite a long time. And I was without everything. And I've mentioned to some people, when I look back on those days and my arrival here and what happened to me in the first years of my AA history, if I were to pick someone to do that job that I was required to do, I would be the last guy I'd pick, because I wasn't prepared for it. in any way, shape, or manner. I was broke. I was homeless. I had no clothes. I had no front. I had no health. I weighed 130 pounds. I was unemployable. I had no education. I'm a high school dropout. And I had to go out and confront people of letters to establish contacts in order to have rummies sent to us and things like that. Had to build up associations with hospitals, with the medical fraternity, with the churches, and so forth. And I'll never forget, I just want to tell you this. I went to churches, and I used to they talk about, when I listen to some of this crap that people give you, you should be so anonymous. If I was that way, you wouldn't have an AA. Really, it's just as ridiculous. Somebody's got to go out and tell somebody about it. This shouldn't happen like this. Somebody has to tell somebody. So I went out and told people, besides rummies. I went to the various churches. This is something. Do you believe that some of these preachers in some of these churches resisted? They thought we were starting some new kind of religion to compete with them. No kidding. So one thing I want to tell you about the Catholics. We eventually got Catholics in our group. It didn't take us long. We started getting them because Cleveland was full of them. And after this, I'd been talking a lot. I went out and spoke to the Ministerial Association, all the ministers that met in groups. Then I worried about the Catholic Church because they had different ideas about things, and this fellowship of ours came out of the Oxford movement, which was strictly a Protestant evangelical movement. So I didn't expect to get any great hurrahs from the Catholic Church, but I didn't want to get any resistance from them either, which I got from some of the other denominations. So I went to see some priests. Well, in my ignorance, I didn't know any better. I could find out that you can't get any place going to priests about anything in policy of the Catholic Church. You have to go to the bishop. So, well, I'll go see the bishop. I'm just that stupid. I don't know any better. So I head down to the bishop's office downtown, 9th and Superior, and go up there, and I wander into the office of the Catholic diocese, and the lady comes to me and very nicely, polite and smiling, she says, "And what can we do for you?" I said, "I came here to see the bishop." "Oh, you came to see the bishop. How nice." She says, "Follow me." So she takes me through a door in a room here, to another door in another room, another door, and I'm out in the hall where I started from. She threw me out of there so nicely. I stood out there in the hall and I laughed. And it hit me funny. I said, "Boy, these Catholics are really organized." So it dawned upon me that there's certain protocol you go through if you want to meet the bishop. He isn't like walking in and seeing a sales manager somewhere. He's somebody else. But I prayed about this, and I prayed, and I know that someday God would prepare it that I can see that bishop somehow or some way. So sometime later, this was wintertime again. As I said last night, everything happens to me in the winter. I'm reading the evening paper, and I read where the good bishop came out of his office that day and slipped on the ice, and his feet went up in the air, and he come down and broke his leg. And they carted him off to St. Vincent's Charity Hospital. And I read that, and I read it again. I says, "God is working. I'm going to see the bishop." Well, I know there was no use running down to see him right now because everyone's going to be in there telling him, they're going to be telling him how sorry they are he got hurt and all this sort of thing. And he has papers to sign, and he'll be very busy for a while in spite of all this. So I gave him a rest. He's going to be there for some time. So I waited a couple of weeks, almost 3 as I remember, and I thought the good Lord ordained that this is the time to go see the bishop. So I put an AA book under my arm. I had a copy of the Upper Room, that Methodist publication. We used to pay a nickel and ran for 3 months. That was our daily reading. I put that in my pocket, and I went down to Charity Hospital. And through some devious interrogation of a couple of student nurses, I found out what room the good bishop was in. So I hike myself up there, and I walk past his door, and there he is, and they're all by himself, and his legs up in the air in traction, and he's reading a book. He's all by himself. I was right. The people are neglecting him now. So fools rush in where angels fear to tread. So I bust right into the bishop's room, and I introduce myself, and lo and behold, he's glad to see somebody. He's lonesome. Nobody's paying attention to him anymore, and he's used to a lot of attention. So he asked me what my pleasure was, and I told him that I wanted to talk to him about something about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started explaining this to him. He listened. Finally, he says, well, that sounds like the Oxford movement to me. I says, well, it was, but it isn't. And I tried to explain why we broke out of the Oxford movement. That seemed to satisfy him. So then I said to him, we have a book here. I would like for you to read this book. He says, I'll be glad to. I have plenty of time. Give me the book. So I handed him the AA book, and then I sprung this upper room on him. I says, here's what we use for daily reading. I says, I presume you may have something more appropriate for your folks, because he knew this was put out by the Southern Methodist Church. And he's, oh, no, that's all right. That won't hurt them. They can use it. You know, I never forget that. It won't hurt them, he says. I says, well, I presume you may have something more appropriate for your folks. He says, well, I says, we have a literature table that's pretty bare, and we like anything we can find in a line of spiritual literature that we can read and so forth. He said, you want some things? I says, yes, I would appreciate. He sent us bales of stuff. And we just filled our table full of our literature table. And that literature table was something else. I'm not kidding you. We always had this stuff on there, and we got some Emmett Fox stuff on there. And we had always a big book. When the meeting was concluded, that table was as clean as a hound's tooth. They took everything off it, including the book. And they didn't seem to pay for the book either. So that's how we got cooperation. We never had any problem with the Catholic Church. First thing you know, he started sending some of his drunken priests into us. So we had no problem with them, and we got full cooperation, more than I ever would hope to have. And it was good. So those are some of the little things that happened. I mentioned a while ago about how I came into this fellowship. When I was in the hospital, I mentioned last night how Doc put me on my knees, making me acknowledge that I believed in God before I ever got out of that hospital. After I was in the Oxford movement for a couple of months or so, I was listening to this stuff. I didn't know a whole lot that was going on, but the people there, the men, and also the non-alcoholics in there, they had a great fellowship going there, and they were talking God all the time. They read out of the Bible, and they had other spiritual things that they read, and they had a program that we were supposed to live by. The first thing when we got up in the morning, it told us in the Bible we should go in our secret closet and commune with God. So as a funny thing, you go into any alcoholic's home and go into the bathroom and sit down, and you'll find a Bible in there and a copy of the upper room. They figured that was their secret closet. They took it quite literally. But we were taught to have communion every morning with our Maker. There was when AA program was put together, I want to mention this because it's very important. There were two schools of thought, two philosophies in AA. There was a New York philosophy and there was the Ohio philosophy. And never the twain shall meet. And there was friction from the very beginning. The people in New York, Bill Wilson, Hank Parkhurst, and Burwell, and all those birds up there, they professed atheism and agnosticism. Over in the Midwest, they called us the Bible punchers because we laid God right on the line, and they didn't like this up in New York. There was resistance. So when the book was written in the fall of 1938, we had no money to get this book published, so Hank Parkhurst, who was Bill Wilson's right-hand man, his partner in crime, Hank did all the legwork on that book, and he went out and found a printer who agreed to print this book at a slow time in his year when he wasn't doing much business. And he would print it, and he would hold the books in escrow, and when we wanted any books, we'd have to lay the books on a barrel head, and he'd give you a book. So he gave us a date that we had to have the book in there for publication. And this big argument came up between New York and Ohio about God. We wanted God, and I don't know how they could have, what kind of reasoning they used up there in New York about this God stuff, because God is actually mentioned over 200 times in our AA book, if you'll notice. But they didn't want him emphasized. So when it came to the steps where it mentions God, you will notice in italics it says, as I understand him, God as I understand him. The reason for that is this. The time for the publication came up, and unless something was done real quickly, we weren't going to get that book published. So we compromised in Ohio for the benefit of the agnostic boys up in New York to put as I understand them, which softened the blow for them. It was a compromise. Now some people claim that is good, and some people claim it stinks. And I don't think it's so good either, and I'll tell you why. It gives people, an alcoholic will squeeze out of anything. He don't want to be put in a place where he can't sneak out of it. We always have to have an out or an ace somewhere. So they don't want to admit to God. People come to AA, they've been running away from him for so long, and they've had some pretty sorry experiences as far as the religion is concerned. A good many people have who come here. And when they hear that, as I understand them, some people lead them to believe they can accept anything for God. So I have heard people say that they can take for their God a chair, a desk, a light bulb. Hey, that's their God. I'll bet you heard the same crap. Let me read you this. It says, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and my life has become unmanageable. Then it says, I came to believe that a light bulb could restore me to sanity. I'm not through yet. I made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of the light bulb, as I understand. I admitted to my light bulb, to ourselves, and another human being, the exact nature of my wrongs. We're entirely ready to have the light bulb remove all my defects of character. Humbly ask my light bulb to remove my shortcomings. How asinine can you get? Now, I'm not the only guy here that's heard that in meetings. My God has a name. My God has a name, and I was taught this very early in my career in the Oxford movement, and God's name is Jesus. And if you don't like my God, go ahead and get your light bulb or whatever you want. But I would hate like the devil to trust my everlasting soul to a light bulb or a desk or a chair. So I have to get acquainted with who my God is. I've been introduced to him on my knees early in my career, and I do the same thing with people I bring into this fellowship. Now, just read those steps over sometime and put light bulb in there all the way down through the last one. It'll give you a lesson you'll never forget. Okay. But recently, in these last few years, I do not have an opportunity to sponsor new people. First of all, I don't need that exercise anymore. Grace and I have sponsored people in our home, and they go on out and they do the same kind of sponsoring that we do. And here's what happens. People come to our home, they call us from all points of the compass. I mentioned this, I think, the other night, that they hear about this freak down in Castleberry, Florida, that has some way of fixing rummies in AA, who've been having a lot of problems with AA and a lot of doubts and running up a lot of blind alleys, and they're miserable, and they hear about this guy that has some way of taking them through the steps in 2 days, and they go home and they never drink anymore and they have a good life. Now, this happens all the time. And this is nothing new. It's been going on for several years. So they call us. I do the best I can to sponsor people over the phone or to qualify them, rather, over the phone so that I don't waste a lot of their airfare coming down to our place for nothing. But you can't always do it completely, so I have a qualification when they arrive at the house. And here's what it is. Now, remember, I'm interested in the bottom line. I'm not interested in what he talks about or thinks about when he gets here, he or she. They come to get what I have. I don't want what they have. To make that very plain, it says, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths and so forth. So I don't want what they have, but they are not the happiest people in the world, believe me. And they come down to our place, and they've been in misery for a long time, some of these people. So here's my qualification. First of all, I have to know that you are an alcoholic. You have to know it. You have to admit it. How do I know this? We do this by sharing. I have you tell me about yourself. I tell you about myself. And if this jibes and you are an alcoholic and you admit you are, I know you are, then we can go someplace. The next question I ask you is, what do you want to do about it? You tell me, well, I want to quit. Well, that's fine, Buster. Lots of people will quit if I'll quit for them. And this is an old game around AA. Let George do it, you know. So they don't like to hear that too well, but next question's the one that ties them up, and to which I get some very odd answers in the beginning, many times. I say to him, what are you willing to do to quit drinking forever? Forever? Wow. This bird's never had a week's sobriety in his life and talking about forever. That's impossible. So you do get some funny answers, but there's only one answer I can accept. He has to tell me he's willing to do anything, and I'll stay with him till I think he's going to give me that answer. And when he does, it's my option to give him what I have, and if he don't want what I have, he can go home. Period, and suffer in his misery or enjoy it however he wants to do. I didn't make this up. You heard it read a little while ago. It says in our program about if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, you are now ready to take certain steps. Eh? It says in that 12-step program. You hear it read at most meetings. You see it hanging on the walls in clubs. You see it in the book. It's there. I didn't make it up. I'm just talking what the AA program is. I'm not talking about BB or CC or XX. I'm talking about AA. So our program is absolute. So he says, okay, anything you say, that's it. He wants what I have. I said, what do you want? He says, anything. Now, it's my option. The ball's in my court. He has no option to argue with me. I am the authority then, because he knows that he's whipped. And he's come to me for help. And I'm going to give him the medicine. And here's the medicine. First step says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. It says something else there. Our lives had become unmanageable. Most people I have found that come my way have never heard the second part of that step. or if they have paid no attention to it. They hear that first part, I'm powerless over alcohol, and that's all they hear. So they yammer about alcohol for month after month and year after year till they're dizzy and make everybody else dizzy listen to them. It's on their mind all the time. They're powerless over alcohol. They don't hear that thing about their life being unmanageable, and that is the most important part of the step. Because you come here screwed up, your life's unmanageable, you come here to get it manageable. People don't realize that. There are 200 well-chosen words in our 12-step program, and if you look at it, you'll find alcohol is only mentioned once. Once. That's in the first part of the first step. But from that time on, that point on, there's an awful lot said about getting our life manageable. This program is a living program. It's not a dry or drunk program. To be the fact that we are alcoholics, that is a key when we are powerless over alcohol. That's the key that opens the door where we have an opportunity to learn how to live. If we did not have this, we would never have this opportunity. You know, we are the most fortunate of all people, because all down through history they didn't have any out for alcoholics, as I mentioned. Now we have it. We have the out for the alcoholic, and you and I are the people who have to spread this word and carry this message. There's no one else to do it but you and I. So that would mean that we better find out what it's all about and how to distinguish things and how to put this program across to other people who need it so badly. Alcoholics Anonymous is not what it says in that preamble. This is an association for alcoholics who want to do something about their life, who want to quit. Not for anybody dingbat that wants to come in and sit down. This isn't an entertainment. This is not a circus. This is not a movie show. This is a life-changing program. And we come here, and it's the only chance we ever have of getting a good life is to change our life, because we're so screwed up when we get here. But unless somebody takes charge of us and sponsors us and teaches us, we're going to have a hard time getting on this program, because we are going to shy away from the fundamental things that this program calls for. People come here, they're full of fear. They've had all kinds of rotten experiences in religion. They're scared to death of God. They have some funny ideas about who He is. To most people, they have the same silly idea that I used to have. I've told this before, but my idea of God when I arrived here was some old man sitting up on a white throne with a long white nightgown, a long white beard, writing dirty things in a book about me. He's going to fix me, boy. And I learned all that stuff when I was a kid. I was given those impressions when I was a kid. What do you think that did to my life? I'm no different than you are. You've got the same dose. That's why you're here. Well, so I take them down this program now. Admitted we're powerless over alcohol and that my life is unmanageable. So now you're going to start getting your life managed, and here's the way we do it. The second step, I might say people fail in AA in step 1 because they don't see that second part of that step, and they fail in step 3 and step 4, and I'll go into that in a minute. The second step says, I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Now, I didn't say I believed that when I arrived here. I certainly didn't. Doc made me get down there, admit that I knew God and knew of Him and believed in Him. But I didn't have any conception about this power greater than myself restoring me to any sanity. And I know there's a lot of people that feel the same way, so they skip that. But how did I come to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity? It is the power of example of these men who preceded me. These 14 men walked into that hospital room and talked to me, the alcoholics, and told me their stories. And these fellows were laughing. It's been a long time since I had anything to laugh about, believe me. And they had something I wanted. There was something, their kinship there, and I wanted what they had, and I wanted to be one of them. I wanted to belong to something. I didn't belong to the human race when I got here, really. So I came to believe in this power greater than myself that I call God because they told me they believed in it. And if I did, he would do the same thing for me they did for them. And I wanted to believe it. That's the whole thing. Not that I believed when I got here. Listen to this next step. Made a decision. Isn't that something for a rummy to do? We are the most indecisive people in the world. And here we're making a decision already. I made a decision, listen to this one, to turn my will and my life over to the care of God. That creature with the nightgown back there that I'm scared to death of and running away from. Believe me, if I don't hurt a whole lot, I'm not about to do that. I can't do that on common sense because I don't have any common sense. It says back in that second step that we're going to be restored to sanity. I laugh. Some of these people, it's serious. I'm serious about this. People say to me on that second step, well, I'm not nuts. You're not nuts. If you're not nuts, you don't belong here. This is the greatest collection of nuts in the world. We are qualified. If you don't think you're nuts, just look back a bit and consider some of the details that you occurred in during your drinking career and ask yourself if those are the antics of a sane mind. We're all crazy. We're nuts. So we get restored to sanity. So I made a decision to turn my will and life over to this care of God. And as I say, you're not going to do that unless you hurt real badly. Alcoholics never do anything by common sense or thinking. Never. It's by emotion. It's how we feel. If we feel a certain way, we'll do something. If we don't, all the king's horses are not going to change it. So if we hurt enough, we're going to make this decision because there's no other place to go. We've just worn out all the outs for ourselves. So this is our last go-round. One of the first things I have to do when a person comes to my house is I try to give him a good feeling about himself, a good self-image. They come to our house with the poorest image of themselves. It's pitiful to see some of these poor ducks, and they've been around for several years or many years in AA. Some of them drunk, some not, but still miserable. And they have an awful poor image of themselves. So I have to build up their self-esteem right off the bat. How do I do this? I tell him who the alcoholic is. I describe the alcoholic and tell him about the virtues we have. And we have them. Alcoholics have characteristics in common, and we kept looking at these characteristics, and boy, we got things on these other earth people they never dreamed of. And in fact, alcoholics are a superior type of person. Alkies have a type of imagination and ingenuity and so forth that other people can't dream about. I've often said about alcoholics that they can operate on 20 or 30% of their efficiency and beat civilians who are operating on 80% of theirs. They can do it. And you know alcoholics, you being one, you know what you've done. When you're really fogged up, you get by with a lot of stuff. The other people couldn't do this. If I had the time, I'd tell you some experiences of my own along that line, just to give you evidence. But take my word for it. We are a superior type of person. Every alcoholic is a drunk, but every drunk is not an alcoholic. This is a thing people get confused on, too. Just because a guy drinks a lot of booze or a gal drinks a lot, that don't make him an alcoholic. I drank with fellas in bottle gangs that drank as much booze as I did and the same kind of crap that I drank. They were not alcoholics. They could quit any time they got a different hobby. I couldn't do that. I remember one time, just as an example, there was a bottle gang I used to drink with out in the last house I lived in before my wife threw me out for good. And this bunch, we used to get into all kinds of stuff. Oh, we stole one bartender out of business. We crashed weddings. Any place that's having a wedding, we invited ourselves. Nobody knew. Everybody's half drunk anyway, and we got a lot of free booze. They go out and do all kinds of crazy things. There's a police chief down there. We didn't like him. He's always sticking his nose in our business. And the city bought him there's a little village I was in out there. They bought him a new police car one day, a Ford. They put all the lights on it and the whole thing, you know. And where I was living, they used to park in a median strip out there in front of that bar room. And he used to park his car out there in that median, keep the motor running, get the battery up, I guess. He got that brand new car, and he had it 2 days. And while several people engaged him in conversation, several others went out the back door and stole that damn police car. And the place wasn't built up. We took it way down in the woods and hid it. He didn't find that car for 3 weeks. If he'd ever found out who was involved in that, we'd all been lathered, believe me. But this is the kind of crazy stuff these guys would do. We'd crash parties, go any place. They put on a fake fight. Or you get a fight started in a political meeting. Oh, it was something. Fun. They were having fun. I went on the bum, disappeared, and I was gone for some years. And one day, I was sober for a number of years, and I was having a lot of throat trouble. I was having a series of operations for tumors in my throat. I was going through one of those things where you go to a hospital and then you have to go home and get strong enough to come back and have another operation. It's one of those miserable things. And I went downtown one day. I was going to the ball game. I wanted to go down and see the New York Yankees play. I used to like to see those fellas. Joe DiMaggio was one of my favorite ball players, and so Joe was coming to town that day, and so I went down to the ball game. I was a very sick duck. I was lost weight. My clothes were hanging on me, and I'm walking down there, and down that West Superior Street, it's a whole line of saloons there, and here I walk. Bingo, right smack dab into 4 guys I used to drink with in a bottle gang years ago. Now remember, those guys were real, those are the fellas I'm talking about who used to do all this stuff. There's 4 of them, and they're all dolled up. They have pongee shirts on, they have white pants and 2-tone shoes, and they're all lit. I mean, they're all drunk, having a great old time. They're just enjoying everything. They're on the way to the ball game, too. And I noticed something. They each had a box seat ticket stuck in their shirt pocket there for the ball game. My God, when we were all getting together, we could have raised the price of a ticket in 2 weeks, the whole bunch of us put together. And they were working, they were in business, they were doing fine. The war had come along eventually and everybody got to work. Those guys were doing great. They were still having fun drinking. They said, "Snyder, you old goat, we haven't seen you. We thought you were dead." Well, I looked about half dead at the time, and he says, "Come on in, have a drink." Now, they were under 90 pounds of steam then, these guys were. We go into one of those joints, and boy, they're throwing them in just like they used to. No different. I stand there looking at these clowns, just thinking if all I had to do was join them, I'd be back on that skid row again. That didn't worry them. They're not alcoholics. They're heavy drinkers. A lot of those heavy drinkers don't have sense enough to be an alcoholic. You have to have something on the stick to be a rummy. You're an exceptional person. You really are. I don't care what you look at. If you're a nurse, a doctor, if you're a teacher, if you're a salesman, whatever you are, a mechanic, you'll always find the alcoholics in the top 10. Always. I became a salesman after I came into AA. I wasn't a salesman before, but I could never have gone back in banking and finance after I got in. I wasn't properly equipped for that, and I don't think I could handle it anyway, but I went into sales work, and I did various types of selling. I worked for one concern that had over 600 salesmen in the United States and Canada, and for 7 years I was with that outfit. I was always in the top 10. Top 10. I'm a rummy. I suppose the other 9 guys were, too. I trained a lot of salesmen. I worked in various sales capacities. I've been a sales manager. I trained men. The best salesmen I ever found were rummies. If you could keep the buttery guys sober, you got world beaters. They could outsell anything, anybody. It's a fact. So think well of yourself. You've got things that other people don't have. Don't let those people run you down and tell you what a bum you are. Kick them in the teeth. Stand up for yourself. People apologizing because they belong to AA. That's the most asinine thing I ever heard of. Go out and tell them you belong to AA. Tell them you're doing something. It kills me. These birds been crawling around on their hands and knees in some damn gutter, shooting snipes or something, and everybody see them in town. They all know they're a drunken bum, and they come in AA. Don't tell anybody I'm here. Don't tell anybody I belong to AA. Gee, some of this crap they give you in AA today. Don't tell anybody you were here. Don't tell anybody about this. Don't mention anything. You were here. Don't mention it. A secret society. How are you going to carry a message with that kind of crap? Grace tells everybody she belongs to AA. Every place she goes. It's funny to listen to that gal sometime. I'll never forget, we nearly got our marriage postponed on account of this. Let me tell you, yeah. We were going to get married. I met Grace. She was a blind date. And I met her. Eventually, we're going to get married. So she has to go out and buy a dress for this. Women buy a dress for everything, so they get for married, too. So she looked around Orlando and couldn't find anything that suited her, so she went over to Daytona Beach. She got in one of those fancy shoppies over there. And immediately she starts telling this gal there that's waiting on her that she's an alcoholic. Belongs to AA. Immediately. And the gal says, well, who are you going to marry? This woman admitted she was also an alcoholic. This woman said, yeah, I belong to AA too. She says, who are you going to marry? She says, I'm going to marry Clarence Snyder. She says, you're going to marry Clarence Snyder? She said, I know Clarence Snyder. He had something to do with our divorce. He figured in our divorce. She almost canceled the sale. It seems this girl and her husband belonged to the same group I did when I was living in St. Petersburg, and they adopted a little kitten, a male kitten. And these people kind of liked me. They were a couple that are on my side anyway. And they named this kitten Clarence after me. And of course, this kitten grew into a great big tomcat. And I feel very proud that I had a tomcat named after me. But anyway, this couple had trouble, domestic troubles, and they broke up and they had a divorce. They didn't argue too much about the money or the furniture or what have you, but who was going to get Clarence? That was a big argument. So she's telling Grace about this. So Grace was quite relieved to know that there's these details of this tomcat business. So it's funny, she tells anybody. I was on a plane one time, and it was kind of empty. We're coming from across this country somewhere. So Grace went back a couple rows of seats and lay down to sleep on the thing. She takes that thing down where she can lay down. First thing you know, the stewardess comes up to me, and I'm sleeping up against the window, and she shakes me, wakes me up. I look up and says, what's with you? She says, I belong too. She says, I just been talking to your wife back there. Says that I just came into the group in Atlanta a month ago, the stewardess. So she tells everybody that she's in AA. I don't know where it's hurt anybody, but I do know something that's brought an awful lot of people around their attention to AA. They look at her, they say, you can't be a drunk. Look at you, you're too pretty. They think you have to be some kind of a bum, some kind of beat-up rascal or something. You can be that too, but you don't have to be. A lot of people come in here, they've never been in a jail yet. Lots of people never been in jail. Lots of people never been out there laying in the gutter. Lots of people haven't been pinched. Lots of people haven't been up and before the judge. They're just as alcoholic as I was. They were just they got in a different locations at the right time, and I got in there at the wrong time, that's all. But this happens. So alcoholics are alcoholics. And you and I, it rests upon us to carry this message. It tells us that in the program, in our 12-step program about carrying the message. I told you last night how long it took me to learn a message, get a message. We have to carry the message. There's no one else to carry it. And here's one of the big problems in AA today. I want to share this with you. Unfortunately, a lot of people in AA have given up their right to work with alcoholics and have turned it over to these dry-out places and expect them to do the job we're supposed to be doing. Yes, sir. I was very happy to learn a couple of weeks ago that in Florida, and I'm sure this is going to happen all over the country, the Blue Shield and Blue Cross down there is limiting to 1 to 7 days any money for alcoholic treatment. 7 days instead of that 30-day deal that they're paying $5,000 and $6,000, $7,000 for. And that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard of. We used to sober them up for $40. You could put them in a real hospital in those days for $60. But oi, what it is now. You don't even need that. I'm not against sobering up places. I think there's a lot of people that should have something like that, and a lot of people don't need it. But I certainly don't need any $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 treatments. I'll tell you that. That's a rip-off, plain and simple. And I'm glad the insurance companies are backing up. The reason the Blue Cross stopped this is breaking their insurance company. They're running out of money. Can't afford it anymore. So people keep opening these places. Some of these big-name people you hear monkeying around through AA are opening these kind of places. You're going to hear about a couple more of them very shortly. I can tell you that because I know they're headed this way. And they're going to open these $5,000 and $6,000 places. They got a big name, these guys. And they trade on that. Watch it. I'd rather take a guy home and sober him up than put him in most of those places. You know, I think some people need some medical attention when they come here. But medical attention can be taken care of in 3 to 7 days' time. And you don't need any more. But they need, you see what's missing in most of these dry-out programs? They do not have any continuing program after that. They'll start you out, they'll get you sober, then from that time on you float on your own pretty well. But in AA that's different. You get a continuing program. So it says here, we made a decision to turn our will and life over the care of God. That's quite a decision. When I take you through those steps, you're on your knees on that. I introduce you to your new manager in step 3. You meet your new manager in step 3, and you talk to him. I talk to him, and you feel something coming back, really. You meet your new manager. You're unable to manage your life, so you hire a manager in step 3. Now listen, get this next step. This is one that really fractures people. It says, and they misunderstand this, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Made a searching and fearless moral... Now, what does that mean? What is a searching and fearless moral inventory? People misunderstand that. They read a lot of stuff about a 4-step inventory that's put out by various people and places and things. And they're all crazy. They are. They don't know what they're talking about. Let me tell you what it is. Let me tell you first. This is especially applicable to girls that come to our home, women, ladies. When I get down to this 4th step, or when they come in, they hand me this sheaf of papers this thick with all the crud written down they ever did in their life. All their bed crawling and all this crap. That isn't what the 4th step calls for. You don't call for those details at all. Not a bit of it, because the 5th step tells you that. They were interested in the nature of your wrongs, what makes you do these things. So when I come to the 4th step, here's what I do. I have a piece of paper there, and I have all of these things written on a paper. There's 20 questions I ask them. Now, these will be on your tape, so don't come up and ask me to write them out for you. They'll be there. You can get them from somebody. Yeah. So here's what I ask a person for their moral inventory When these women hand me this bunch of crap that they brought today, poor dears have worked weeks and months getting this stuff together. I don't know how they remember all this garbage. Most of the most interesting things I ever got involved in when I was drunk, I don't remember it. Somebody else told me about it. I operate a lot in blackouts. Some of it is a matter of record, too. But here's the questions on a fourth step inventory. I ask him about self-pity, self-justification, self-importance, self-condemnation, criticizing, negative thinking, vulgar immoral thinking, insincerity. Here's one for you kids. Procrastination, dishonesty, impatience, resentment, hate, enviousness, jealousy, laziness, lying, gossiping, selfishness, and fear. Those are the questions. I ask if they have any of those things. So they tell me which ones, so I check them as I go down. Ordinarily, most people have 10 or 12 of these defects of character. 10 or 12. I've only met one person in my experience that had all 20 of them. And you would be surprised who this was. This man was a very successful businessman. He came down from Tennessee, and he was a vice president of a large manufacturing concern up there, and he had a tremendous job and a lot of bonuses, and he had everything that any person could want financially and so forth, and was well set up socially and all that sort of thing. And he was a hot, real top-line executive. And he had every one of those things. And I said to that man, "You are the worst screwed-up bum I've ever met." And he admitted it. Okay. So there are the ones we ask about. But usually people have 10 or 12. I had a girl come down from South Carolina once that she had 19. She almost was perfect. But she missed it by one, the dear thing. Now, it's very plain. Those are the things we have to find out in a moral inventory. Not the details of your transgressions, but what caused them, what brought you around to do all those things. So here's what we do. We find out what these things are and what happens. The fifth step says, I admit it to God, myself, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs, not the wrongs themselves. A lot of people think it's the nature of our wrongs. It reads very plainly there, and people miss that entirely. It's the nature of the wrongs. Okay. It says, I admit it to God, my new manager, myself, and to another human being. I'm the other human being he's admitting it to. Why should it be another human being? Why God and yourself another human being? This is scripturally correct. It says in a good book, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there will I be also. So this guy's there with me before his new manager. The 3 of us are together making this admittance, see? All right, then listen to the next step. Listen to this one. We were entirely ready. Ready for what? We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. All of them, it says. Entirely ready to have God remove. Why God remove? I can't remove them. I admit it in the first step that I'm powerless. My life's unmanageable. So my manager has to help me with this. That's what I hired him for. If you have a manager, why don't you use him? What are you paying him for? So my manager's going to help. So I'm entirely ready. It doesn't say partly ready. Alcoholics are entirely in everything they do. We're extremists. We never do anything halfway. So I'm entirely ready, what? For God to remove all these defects. I'm very frank to admit to you there's a few defects of character I'd rather keep. They're lots of fun. They're fun things. But our program does not give me that option. It's all or nothing at all if I want to get the best out of this. If I start cutting corners, I'm going to get myself just so much more miserable. I'll never get the element in what I'm looking for. Right? So, I'm entirely ready to have God remove them all. Let George do it. Here's something you can stick over on George. Let him take them away from you. So you have to ask him, see? So in 7th step, I said, I humbly ask him to remove my shortcomings. Humbly asked him. I didn't make a deal with him like I used to do. God, if you'll get me out of this mess, I'll be a good boy. I get in some kind of a bind. I'd say, God, help me. I'm in a trouble here. I'll be a good boy. I'll never run out with Sadie Glutz again. I'll behave myself. If you just get me out of this mess. A deal. Always a deal. It never worked. So we have to learn how to humbly ask him. Throw ourselves on his mercy. He will do anything we ask if we believe he will. You got to believe he will. If you don't believe it, forget it. You got to believe it. So it tells me anything that you ask believing you'll receive. And all your needs will be taken care of. I need to be fixed. And he'll fix me if I humbly ask him. So on the 7th step, my boy or girl is down on her knees again, and we have another talk with the manager. And we admit all these things, and I have to utter the prayer first, and he or she repeats after me. And every one of those items that is checked, I mention, and ask God to remove this. And he asks God to remove it. And we thank him for it. And do you know something? Don't fall out of your chair. They're gone. They're gone. They're gone. He'll take all this stuff away from you. You no longer will have all these defects of character. He'll take them away. And this is what causes us to get in all this mess we're in all the time, of these defects. He takes them like that because he promised he would. Told me, anything you ask, believing, you'll receive. And if you believe he'll do it, he'll do it. So then after you pray to him and talk to him, thank him for it and assume that it's happened. And it has happened. Now that sounds ridiculous to a lot of people, I'm sure. I'm only talking about what happens. This is experience. It's what a lot of people have done, and I've seen it over and over and over. You people here, I'll tell you, most people in AA have no conception of the power of God. They have no conception of what... It tells me in the good book that he's my father, and he has great storehouses of wonderful things, and he wants me to have the best of everything. God wants me to be healthy. He wants me to be prosperous. He wants me to be happy. He wants me to be useful. And this is how we prepare for it. You can't tell me that I'm unhealthy. I'll run a race with a lot of you birds, and I'm 80 years old. Yeah? You girls look out, too. Yeah. I have a good life. I have a wonderful life. I don't say everything is beer and Skittles every day, because we all have problems, and you're going to have problems all your life. But when you get into this program, you will know how to handle problems, because you don't have to do it yourself anymore. You don't have to connive out of things anymore. You got a helper. You got a manager to help you now. This is as simple as it is. Believe it. Don't look at me so damn funny. It's true. It's true. Okay. So I humbly ask them. After the 7th step, I say this to every one of those persons that I'm working with. Grace does the same thing. She does this too. We have what we call a fixing room in our house. She always takes them back in the fixing room, but I take them out on the porch. She always goes in a fixing room. We have fixing room in Eureka, California. We got them up in New York State. We got fixing room every place we go where they have retreats. She uses that fixing room like you wouldn't believe. And I went up there in Northern California one time. I got the biggest charge out of it. They have a sheriff up there of that county. That guy is about 3 times my size. He's like this. He's about 6'8", this guy. Weighs 300 pounds. And he's all man. I mean, he's not fat and flabby. He's man. He's a muscle. she'd get that great big guy on his knees there along the side of her. She was almost lost. I couldn't even see her. And that guy gave his heart to Christ, to Jesus, changed his life like that. He's the greatest guy. You want to meet him sometime. If he pinches you, tell him you belong to AA. He'll let you out. But he's a great fella. But when I see some of the things that happen in this, it's to most people it would be unbelievable, but it happens. So after the seventh step, I tell everybody this. I tell them this. You are now the cleanest person in the world. You do not have one thing against you. God has forgiven everything you've ever done. I don't care what kind of crud you've been into. You've asked forgiveness, and He has given it to you. You're forgiven everything you've ever done. I say you are as clean as a driven snow. Nothing against you. He owes nothing. And when God forgives you, He forgets. It says in a good book, He will remember it no more. It'll be as far as the east is from the west. So your sins are forgiven. You're clean. All right. Now what do you have to do? You have to keep it clean. Everything's gone. I like to put it this way to a person. I generally do. I say your life is like, you know what a tape recorder is. If you don't, ask him. We have tape recorders. We all know how to operate a tape recorder. And it goes along and it picks up everything we're saying. Well, maybe you want to erase that thing, that tape. It's a lousy one, so you don't need it. You want to use it for something else, so you erase the tape. You just run it without talking in there. It erases it, see? Your life is this way. When you were born, it's like your life started on a tape. Everything you have done, good, bad, and otherwise, is on that tape. After that seventh step, the tape is erased. There is no more record of your life. It's gone. It's gone. So you start on a new tape. Okay? That's the way I like to put it. Now, you have to keep it clean. Our program is divided into 4 phases. First phase of our program is step 1. That's a step of admittance. I admit I'm powerless over alcohol and my life's unmanageable. Second phase is a 2nd through 7th step. That's submission, where I submit my will and life without reservation to the care of God. I accept Him fully and completely and turn my life over to Him and dedicate my life to Him. That's your second phase. Third phase is restitution. After the 7th step, I give these people some papers, pens, send them into the room. We're through for the day. I take 1 day to go through the first 7 steps. So they take this, when they go to bed they sit down there and write out all the restitution they owe. And I tell them who to put on that paper. Start with your own family, your wife or husband, your mother, father, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, and on and on and on. Your neighbors, the people you work with, the people you've cheated, the people you owe money to, and everybody that you owe anything to, in apologies or otherwise, put it on that paper and bring it to me in the morning. And they bring this thing to me in the morning with all these details of those different people. Some of these people are dead and gone. Some of them have disappeared, but they put it down just the same, everybody. They bring it to me, and I go over it with them and tell them what to do in every instance. Tell them about how they should make the restitution. Any new person coming in AA should never try to go through this restitution step alone. He should have help by some person who is knowledgeable and understands and has a loving attitude and has a little smarts about him. Because you can go out in your enthusiasm and cause a carnage by going out and telling people things involving someone else. And that's a very easy thing. We can't go out and get our skirts cleaned at the expense of someone else. I'll give you an example. Some time ago, quite a bit ago, I happened to be at a meeting one time down in Winter Park at noon. I think Grace was in the hospital at the time, I believe, and I used to stop at this meeting every once in a while at noon because I passed there going back and forth to the hospital. And they have a meeting every noon, so I went in there, and I'm a people listener as well as a people watcher. I listen to people when they talk in AA, and I hear all that wisdom going around those tables. Everybody talking, nobody know what they're talking about. And I hear people talking, I hear them hollering help. I always hear 2 or 3 of them that are screaming, they need help. But they don't know it themselves, and nobody else seems to pay much attention or know it either. So I go up to this person after the meeting, and I introduce myself and tell them if they want some help on such and such, I'll be glad to talk with them or find someone else to talk to them. This particular day, I did this very thing. I mentioned this when I was talking. I had my turn to talk, and I told him that. So we got more opportunity to get in trouble than we have to staying straight. You don't believe this? Think about your associates and tell me that I'm wrong. Okay. That's your 10th step. This is what keeps us straight every day. Keeps our life straight. Keeps us clean. 10th step. Listen to this 11th step. This is a humdinger. A lot of words in it. It says in that 11th step that we're seeking something. It says, I sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry that out. A lot of words. Let's break them down. I'm seeking something through prayer and meditation. What's the difference? What is prayer and what is meditation? Prayer is talking to my new manager, and meditation is listening to him. See? I have observed that the good Lord gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth. That ought to suggest something to us. We should do some listening as well as talking, maybe twice as much. If we don't listen for our orders, we're not going to get them. So it says in a good book, be still. Be still. And that's what we do in this 11th step. Be still and listen to Him talk to us. So I'm seeking something through prayer and meditation. What am I seeking? I'm seeking to improve my conscious contact with God. Now, what does that mean? That means I have to keep selling myself the idea that He's right here. He's as close to me as you are. I can talk to Him, I can feel Him, I can get answers from Him. He's not way out in the blue yonder where He's inaccessible, where I used to think He was. He's right here. Remember the time those birds landed on the moon up there? Remember those first fellows that got on that moon and the guy jumped up there, the huge big leap for humanity? What did they do up there? They talked to Him up there. Remember that? They talked to Him on the moon. And we were talking to Him down here. So He really is accessible. I don't care where you are. Hey? You can't get away from Him. He's here. He's everywhere. So I sought through talking to Him and listening to Him to prove my conscious contact with Him. And I have to keep selling myself that He's here and not way out in the blue yonder. He's here. Then now it tells me what I'm praying for. Ask a lot of people in an AA group what they pray for. You know the answer you'll get? I pray for sobriety. Oh, slob 'em. You don't pray for sobriety. You have sobriety. Thank Him for it. We have a lot of things we can pray for. We got the one thing, we should pray for other people. We should pray for guidance and direction. We should never do anything without asking the Lord first His direction. And boy, you'll wind up in some of the funniest things sometimes by doing that. I know I was a salesman, and I'd have plans made to be a certain place at a certain time. And that time came, I wasn't there at all. I was somewhere else. And I had nothing to do with this. In retrospect, I can see that place that I did wind up, I was supposed to be there. Eh? I tell you, the things that happen in my life, I could write books about it, and they were true. And not only my life, I see it in so many other people, too. I wish it could be in everyone's. It can be if you will accept this. So there I am. I'm seeking to talking to Him and listening to Him. faith comes through the spoken word. We speak this and we get faith. So it tells me what I'm praying for. What does it say? It doesn't say sobriety. It says praying only for knowledge of His will for me and the power to carry it out. What do you want me to do, boss? I'm your boy. You're my manager. Tell me what you want and give me the strength to do it. Boy, he'll tell you what to do. I'm not kidding you. He'll put you in places you never dreamed of being. I guarantee you, I'll promise you that. And I also know this. It tells me in the good book that He'll never put anything on me that He won't give me the power to execute. So, what do you want me to do, boss? And give me the power to do it. He'll give it to you, boy, double. Believe me, you'll get it given to you. You might not like all the orders He gives you. You don't like all the orders from the boss gives you where you work either, but he pays you. And this boss you that got now pays you a lot better than he does. But remember that. So you got to do what he wants you to do. We are here to do service, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our new manager, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry it out. Now what happens? Step 12. You hear so much I hear about 12 stepping. I'm going 12 stepping. I'm going 13 stepping. Another gal and I decided one time down at a retreat down in Texas to get a 14th step. I thought we needed a 14th step. So we got up a 14th step. Love them and leave them. Well, anyway, it says here something happened because we took these steps. Having had a spiritual experience, how did we get this spiritual experience? As the result of these steps. We took these steps, and as a result, we had a spiritual experience. And what is that? Pray tell. You'll hear people in AA say, come and change your thinking. Change your thinking? If we could think, we would never come here. It isn't your thinking. In Isaiah, it says the whole head is sick. And boy, our head is sick. This blubber of ours is, when we get here, we're anything but well up here. We're very unwell. So, it says here, having had a spiritual experience as the result of these steps. We took these steps and we had this change, this spiritual experience. And what was that? That's not a change here. It's not a change in your thinking. It's 14 inches lower. It's down here. Okay? That's where the change comes. Down here. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me, I think I've told some people here this, and it bears repeating because people forget about 90% of what you tell them anyway. When I was attending Oxford group meetings at T. Henry's home in Akron, there was a great big old boy there that took some kind of a shine to me, and he was a real great big rough character, this guy. And I was halfway scared of this bird, Bill Van Horn. Doc fished him out of a nut factory, and he came into the group and he stayed sober the rest of his life. And Bill used to think a lot of me for some reason, or I don't know why. I guess he collected old cats and dogs or something. But anyway, this was the way it was. And Bill always made a point of talking to me after meetings down there in Akron, in that Oxford group place. So he'd get me behind T. Henry's library table where I couldn't get away from him. And this big old bird used to tower over me like a moose. And he would talk to me, and as I say, I was half scared of this guy because he cut out of a nut factory, and he was such a big man and picking on me all the time. I didn't know what all of his designs might be. Well, anyway, one night he got me back at that table again. He said this to me. He says, Clarence, I'm going to give you the answer to this whole ball of wax. I'm going to give you something here, and I want you to read it. I want you to memorize it. I don't want you to ever forget it. This is the way we got suggestions in those days. So he takes his billfold out and starts unloading all this debris on the table there. And he's looking for something. He finds what he's looking for, a piece of paper, and he hands it to me. And I look at that piece of paper, and lo and behold, it's a Bible verse. And I looked at that Bible verse, and I look at this big moose in front of me. I thought, well, maybe they let him out of that place too soon, you know? But I did what Bill told me to do. I read that, I reread it, and I reread it and reread it. And it has become one of my very favorite verses. And you listen to this and see if this doesn't hit the nail right on the head. It's the 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, and the 17th verse. And it reads this way. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. Think of that. If any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All that old garbage is gone. We got rid of it in this 12-step program. We accepted God as our new manager. He took all this garbage away from us. It's laying back here. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. After the 7th step, we get a new tape to work on. That old tape is wiped out. How about that? Where can people go today? Really people, a lot of civilians. They don't have what you and I have. They don't have the opportunities you and I have. They're going to smolder and rust and do all this stuff, and very few of them ever have a chance. There are millions of them go to church every Sunday, and they're all going to hell. I mean it. What do? Don't think I don't know something about this, kids. You know, I'm a rummy, and when I get mixed up in anything, I go the whole way. No matter what I get into, I'm gone the whole way. They pick on me, and they make me do something, or I'm an easy mark or something. Because I know when I went into the American Legion, no time I'm an officer in the Legion. I'm the finance man looking after their dough. That is a dangerous thing. Then I go into the lodge. I become an officer in the lodge. I leave there. I get talked into joining a church, much against my will. And I joined this church. My ex-wife got me into this. She had been in this church all her life. Her old man was a preacher in that church. And she had 3 brothers that were preachers and a couple of cousins that were preachers in that denomination. And we wound up, they were going to organize a church in Florida. She reads that in the paper, nothing to do, we go down there. And here's a bunch of old ducks that are retired, 70, 80 years old. These people are all, none of them under 70, I'm sure. And I go in there, I'm about 52 years old, and they look at me like I'm a kid. And immediately they got me running errands and doing things for them. So they organized this church, and I really got buggered into this. And we became charter members, the first 50 people on the rolls, you know. So out there, we had our first classes in a schoolroom. I go out Sunday morning, help them set up their altar and do the ushering and, do all the legwork for these old codgers. And finally, the Synod bought them a building, and they bought a citrus grove and cut down some of the trees and built a building that was supposed to be our recreation hall eventually, but we moved in there for our church services. By this time, the place is expanding, so little Caesar here, by this time they came around and I had a battle with them on this. They wanted me to stand for ordination as an elder. And I resisted this with all 4 feet, but finally they overcame me. I got pressured. Try to keep peace in the family, so I was ordained the elder, which is one of these people that's supposed to help take care of the spiritual needs of the flock, Well, the next year I'm president of the Bloomin' Church, and for 3 years I'm president, and I'm doing everything in that church. And they decide they want to build a church, and these old ducks are all retired. And I said, well, go get one of these fundraising agencies to do it. But those old Dutchmen don't want that. You know who they picked on to raise the money? Yeah. So I was already getting the money for the current expenses. So I raised for that church. Now, this is 25 years ago, I want you to know. I raised $350,000 for that church, and they never had a mortgage on the church. It's a rummy does this stuff. Believe me, boy, they had visitors coming from the north. They all got tapped. Everybody got tapped. And that money came in, and they never had a mortgage. I told that preacher, I says, don't ever talk to this congregation about money. I'll do the pitching for the dough. You just keep quiet. You can make one sermon a year on as far as money is concerned, and don't you talk about any money for building a church. If they're going to get mad at somebody, let them get mad at me. So we got the church built. So after the church is built, I could stand here and tell you for a week about the experiences in that deal. I wouldn't do it again for $7 million, but I wouldn't take that much for the experience, believe me. Anyway, that's the way a rummy will do. I go into some workplace, I wind up sales manager. Why is this? I come to AA and I own it. There's a guy over in Tampa. He was a funny guy. I used to get a kick out of him. Big John. He had a sense of humor, a great big Irishman. And his wife was very active in Al-Anon. She's always Al-Anoning all over the place, you know. And he gets so damn disgusted with her and her Al-Anon activities. And finally he came into AA. He came over to my group in St. Pete one time, and he's talking about his wife. He says, Clarence owns AA, and his wife there is the president. But this is the way it is. Well, this is what an alcoholic does. A real rummy don't ever sit in the back seat. He's got to be out there running. Or if he don't, somebody pushes him out there and makes him run. We are the kind of people that do things. We are doers. We do things. Naturally, we're going to make mistakes, because people that don't make mistakes never do anything. But the people that make mistakes are going to be doing. People do something are going to make mistakes. You can't help it. But we learn from them. We learn from the expense of other people too. I don't have to learn everything the hard way. I learned a lot of things from other people's experience, and I still do. We have a marvelous program. Having had a spiritual experience as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics. Did you get that word, alcoholic? One of the big stumbling blocks in our fellowship today is a lot of people are trying to be everything to everybody, and we just are not equipped to do that. The name of our book is Alcoholics Anonymous, and it says so on the cover. And very plainly, in plain English, that says Alcoholics Anonymous. See that? That does not say Dopes Anonymous. That does not say Fatsos Anonymous. That does not say Nose Pickers Anonymous. It says Alcoholics Anonymous. And we have all we can pray over to take care of alcoholics, and that's our ministry. Now, there are places and facilities for these other people, and that's where they should be directed. But when people come here, we are to qualify them as alcoholics. And if they are alcoholics, we have something for them, and they have something for us. But a lot of these other people, all they have for us is grief. And they'll tear our program apart and tear our AA apart. And that is happening in a lot of places, and don't you think it isn't. Kiddos, we get around a lot of places in this country and out of this country, and we see AA in all of its different dimensions. And we walk into a town. It don't take us very long to find out what's going on and what kind of a tempo that AA has in that town. All you have to do is sit in a meeting and listen for a while. And some of the stuff I hear, I do not like. It shakes me up. Tell you why. We have a very simple program for alcoholics. And alcoholics, we have a ministry in alcoholics, you and I. You and I are the only people, history has proven this, that have the capacity to steer the alcoholic on the path where he's going to get well and stay that well and get useful. Nobody else can do that. I try to tell you how old this thing of alcoholism is and the different things that have been tried. I think I told someone the other night, I have a book this thick at home about the history of alcoholism, written in early 1800s, this book. And it tells about the different things for centuries past, what people did to try to modify the actions and the drinking of alcoholics, and they all failed. Why? We have the combination. And the only way we succeed is in partnership with our new manager. And I don't say you won't stay dry without that, but you're not going to have much fun doing it. We're always going to be wondering what's going to happen next. I don't wonder what's going to happen next. Everything's going to be all right. Every day's Christmas. Every day's Christmas. I have a good life. Grace has a good life. We have a lot of good friends. One time in my life, I didn't have a friend in the world. Not a friend. I had one cousin that would still regard me. She was all right. We were kids together, but she was the only person I could ever say that had any regard for me at all at one time in my life. Today, I can go any place in the country and out of the country, and I have friends. I said something the other night to somebody. I could make a round-the-world tour here. It wouldn't cost me 5 cents. I go and visit you for a while, and you put me up for 3 days, and I go somewhere else to your house, and so on. I believe that fish and company smell after 3 days. So I would make my visit short and sweet, and I'd be welcome when I come back. Yeah, we can do this. Before, there wasn't nobody allow me in their house, let alone have friends. You're the same way. We got a fellowship here that's the grandest thing that ever happened in history. And it only happened a little over 40 years ago. And you and I are the chosen people. The chosen people. We're chosen for this. And since we're chosen for this, we have a responsibility. And the responsibility is working with people like ourselves. We relate to the alcoholic. We can't relate to these other people. There's differences there. People asking me around here today about drugs. Drugs. When you're talking about drugs, you got to figure out what kind of drugs you're talking about. I say this, that there are a lot of pillheads belong here. All the difference between them, they chew their liquor instead of drink it. But there's other people that get on hard drugs. There are other facilities for them, and we don't relate to those people for the simple reason that things happen to them that don't have to happen to us, and that will happen to them. A hard drug user eventually gets into the place where he has to pay $50 to $200 a day to support his habit. Where is he going to get it? Where? He has to turn to crime. He goes and steals. The girls steal. They do shoplifting. Then they get into prostitution. It inevitably follows. It's crime, crime, crime. Those people have to be criminals. An alcoholic isn't a criminal. He's a damn petty thief. He's not a criminal. He don't go out killing anybody for a drink. He don't have to. All we have to do, if you hurt badly enough, you don't have the price of a drink, you can go down to you just walk through any supermarket and pick up some lotion and go through it. That'll relieve the tension for the time being. Or drink some of the vanilla extract or something. I drank worse stuff than that. When I was drinking, when I was on the bum, I paid 7 cents a pint for my booze, and I bought it in a wallpaper store. I would welcome vanilla extract. Don't ever try that stuff. You have to work yourself down to that. It takes seasoning. So an alcohol is available, and it's accessible. Where hard drugs cost a lot of money. So it brings people into other things they have to survive. And we don't have to do that. All right. We went over the steps. Anybody have any argument or any questions about it? I told you I'd go through these steps, this program, tell you what it was today. Yes, who's speaking? Stand up. I didn't hear you. I take 2 days. I give them 7 steps the first day and take them through the rest of it the next day. Tell them how to live the next day. It could be. I've talked to people for 3 and 4 and 5 hours before they've ever gotten ready to go into these steps. I will not chance ruining a person's opportunity to live by rushing them. Sometimes I have to explain things. A person is so bloody screwed up, and so that you have to just ease them along and get them sold on certain things. I have talked to some people 3 and 4. I've talked to some person the whole day and never took them through till the next day. It depends on the individual. Yes, sir. I write them down. No, I write them down. You don't write anything. I don't want you. I can't read your writing. I can only read my own. Huh? Yes, that's right. That's exactly it. That's right. You tell me which one of these you're guilty of, and I check them. See, I have it written down on a paper when you come. So I check the ones you tell me that you're selfish and you're this and that and the other thing. Yes, sir. Well, you have to disseminate what a drug addict is. As I mentioned before, I say there's certain people, these pillheads that chew them, most of them belong here. But we've had them with us forever. But these people that are using those hard drugs that cost them all that dough, there's another facility for them where they can get along much better than here, and we can't do anything for them, really. Well, I don't get new people, but if I took a new person through, I would get him, if he needs sobering up, I get him sober, and after he's sober a few days, then I take him through the steps. But I qualify him before that. I want to know what he really wants to do about it, because I'm not going to fool with him if he's in some kind of a panic and just wants to get out of a temporary problem. I'm not interested in that. But if I get a person who really wants to quit drinking, I do it in a few days. Yes, sir. I have no problem with a higher power, because I don't mention him as a higher power. My higher power has a name. And the sooner that fellow learns who that higher power is, the sooner he's going to get well and quit all this lamp posts and all this other crap. No, I don't have that problem. I'll tell you why. This man has come, or woman has come to me to get what I have. And he's going to get what I have. I don't want what he has. When he starts telling me about his God, forget it. I'm going to tell him about mine. If he won't accept mine, let him go lay in bed with his God and sweat as long as he wants to sweat. And he'll come around if he wants to do something about it. You see, when I talk to a person, I say, what are you willing to do to quit drinking forever? Here's what kills them. They tell me they're willing to do anything. He has no option to give me any argument. Because he come what I want. I don't care what he has. I've met some of the funniest people, these different cults they belong to and all this crap. I went all through that myself. I went through a lot of that stuff. One of the guys who early in my career was into spiritism. And we used to go down to his house and have spiritist meetings and get the old table jumping around and all this crap. That stuff's of the devil. He taught me how to grow a beard right in front of people, and I could do it. Believe it. I'm not kidding you. Boy, we got out of that stuff. I remember old Bill Wilson used to go nuts. He used to write messages on his chest, you know. We got scared to death of this stuff. Yes, sir. Well, they sure are guides to progress. We need some guides to progress, and these are the ones. This is what gives us progress. I don't care what people do. I've heard some of the black-goddess things that people do. And here's all I go by is there's 200 words here, and we don't need anyone taken away. We don't need them added to it. You see what I mean? When we take these 12 steps, the way they're laid out, we take these 9 steps, our life changes. This is a life-changing program. Remember that. And this is a prescription for living. Now let me put it, if you'll give me a few minutes, I want to give you an example. We are terminally ill people. You'll agree with that? We have a terminal illness. We all agree. We've seen people die with this stuff. They're doing it all the time. Millions have. All right. Supposing this. You get sick someday. Boy, you feel lousy. You don't know what's wrong with you. You ache here and you ache there and your stomach's upset and everything else. You got the hot heat and the sweats and what have you. So your wife said, go to the doctor and find out what's wrong with you. So go down to the doctor, and you go in there, and he looks you over, and he pulls your tongue out and looks in your ear and looks in your eyes and taps you on the chest and a few other places, and he says, boy, I don't know about you. You need a thorough examination. You got to go in the hospital. So he dumps you in a hospital. Well, as I said before, you don't get one doctor in a hospital. They have a union. You get 6 of them. And they're all thumping you someplace or other. They're all specialists, see? And you're in there, and away they go. The first day, you're running down there for examination. They're taking your blood and taking everything else. And that goes on all day. You come back, you're pretty much worn out. They do that the second day, and you're getting it good then, but this time you're sore. You're all over. They have you running in place, and they have you not. They really do it to you. So finally, after 2 days of this, in comes your doctor. They haven't told you one bloody thing yet. This is all a secret between that union. So they get all the information together, I guess, and your doctor comes in, and when he walks in that room, you know that he don't have good news. Because his chin is down here somewhere, and he's looking at his shoes. See if his shoelaces are tied. And you'll say, Doc, what about it? What did you find out? What did you find out? What's wrong with me? Then you do get a shocker, because he shakes his head. Then you know it's bad news. You say, well, Doc, what is it? He says, I'm sorry, I don't like to tell you this, but you have a terminal illness. Terminal? That's the end, isn't it? Doesn't that mean the end? Yep. You mean I'm going to die? You're going to die. Oh, Doc, I'm too young to die. I have too many responsibilities. I have family responsibilities. I have job responsibilities, business responsibilities. I'm a major domo in the lodge. I got a lot of things to do. I don't want to die now. I'm too young. Isn't there something you can do, Doc? Well, he says, I'll tell you what I can do. I'll give you a prescription, and you have this prescription filled and take it like I give it to you, and you can add some time to your life. Boy, what a relief this is. The old procrastination again. You don't have to die right now. It's some other time. See? So you're safe again. Give me that prescription, Doc. So Doc sits down there and starts to scribble and scribble and scribble and scribble in all that scribbling that's peculiar to doctors. And finally he hands you the thing and say, now you take this down to the druggist and have it filled. Oh, thank you, Doc. So away you go with the prescription. You get outside the office and you've been to school and you have some smarts. So you're able to read this diagram that he's put down there. And boy, you look down there and man, oh man, there are 12 ingredients in that prescription. And you look down there and gee, this one down here, that stuff is sour. And I don't like sour stuff. I'm a sweet kid. I like sweet stuff. So I file that away in the blubber, see? Look down a little further. There's another thing down here that every time that I take that kind of stuff, I'm allergic to it, and it makes me itchy, and I scratch all the time. And I don't like to scratch in public, so I put that up in the blubber. So I go down a little further. Here's another thing down here, that every time I take that stuff, it causes me to have gas, and I belch all over the place, and I don't like belching in people's faces, so I file that in a blubber, and away I go to the druggist, you know. So I go to the drugstore and say, Mr. Druggist, Dr. Jones says I have a terminal illness, and he gave me a prescription and says that he can add some years on my life if I take this prescription. Will you please fill it for me? He said, I'll be happy to give me the prescription. Wait a minute, Doc. Pull it away from him. This item up here, this sour stuff, I don't like sour stuff. I like sweet stuff. Will you leave that out, please? He says, you mean that? Yeah. Okay, give it to me. No, wait a minute. This item down here, every time I take that stuff, it gives me the itch. And I don't like to scratch all over the place in front of people. Will you leave that out too? You don't mean that, do you? I sure do. Give it to me. No, wait a minute. There's one more item down here. This stuff down here, every time I take it, it gives me gas, and I don't like to belch in people's faces. Will you leave that out too? He said, you really don't mean that, do you? Yes, I do. All right, give it to me. So he takes a prescription and fills it according to your orders. Do you think you're going to get well? You're going to die 5 inches. That prescription isn't going to do you very much good, because you didn't do what he ordered in the way the specialist prescribed. We had the same thing here in AA. We got a prescription with 12 ingredients. So people think they can take what they want, but forget the rest of it. They told Grace that when she came in AA up in Jacksonville, Florida. That nitwit of a sponsor of hers told her that she could take what she wants and throw the rest out the window. When I met her, I said, you better jump out the window with it, kid, which isn't going to do you any good. So this is the way the cookies crumble. Here's how the cat ate the cabbage. Here it is. So, teach her the program. She's got a wonderful program. If she'd listened to that nitwit up there, she'd have, well, I don't know what would have happened to her by now. But she had her knight in shining armor come along, you know. Well, anyway, that's the way this prescription is. Yes, sir. We got our entire program from the Oxford movement. The Oxford movement had 6 steps, and all we did was take their 6 steps and made 12 out of it. We figured that if alcoholics could screw up 6 steps, they could screw up 12 much easier. Well, he's telling what the experience was of the people who come in, and they took these steps. He says, these are the steps we took, which so-and-so and so-and-so. So, sure, we took them. He's telling how it was supposed to be taken. I don't say everybody took them that way. No.
Bill write that by himself from rarely...
Oh, no, Bill didn't write that stuff. We stole it from the Oxford movement. They stole it from somebody else. Oh, yeah, the Oxford group was a life-changing, it was a spiritually motivated group, and it spread all over the world. It was a very powerful fellowship. And Frank Buckman originated the Oxford group at Oxford College in England with a bunch of college kids. And that thing caught fire, and it spread all over the world. And they had a way of getting their members. They used an inverted pyramid. What they did, they attracted outstanding names, big names, like the Firestones, the Goodyears, and they had a lot of Maharajas and heads of state and heads of governments that belonged to that Oxford movement at one time. It was a very powerful thing. And they figured that when some of these big wheels get in there, presidents of different outfits and congressmen and that, the small fry like you and I would like to get in there and rub elbows with them. So that's how they attracted their people. But they had a good program. They did a lot of good till the connivers got too busy in there, and they ruined it. A lot of good spiritual outfits have been ruined by greed. You want to watch out for that in AA too. Yes, sir. Immediately, when you ask God to remove them, He takes them away from you. They're gone. Now you got to learn how to keep them gone, and you do that in the last 3 steps. Right? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, same thing. Same difference. Yes, ma'am. Well, I do. I don't want anybody messing around with my people if I'm taking them through, because there's too many screwballs around that upset everything I'm doing. When I take somebody through the steps, Grace don't even come in on it. She has her own. When she takes them through, she does it. I don't bother unless she asks me something. Yes. That's very simple. A recovered alcoholic, you're looking at one. You recover after once you take the steps. When you go through these steps, you're recovered. Until that time, you're not. When you take the medicine, you get well. This is the medicine to make us well. And you can unrecover. You can unrecover, just like I think I told some people today. You take TB, tuberculosis. That's a terminal illness. But you can go to the doctor, he can give you certain prescriptions and certain rest and certain diet and one thing or another. If you follow out what he does, you can add a lot of years to your life. You're going to recover. But if you violate it, you can unrecover and die. We got the same thing here. You're recovered once you take the medicine. I went over these steps with people. Yes, all of this stuff would be sent to us. All of the whole book would be sent to us in Akron. And we'd blue pencil it, red pencil it, and send it back with our suggestions, and sometimes they'd blithely ignore it, and other times they'd take some of the suggestions, But they put in pretty well what they wanted to up there. Until that God business came, we had an awful battle on that deal. And that's why we compromised, as I understand him. Yeah, it was a composite work of a lot of people. It wasn't any one person that did this whole thing. Actually, Hank Parkhurst, Wilson's secretary, or Wilson's partner, I'd say Hank had more to do with the writing of this book and the putting together this book than Bill did. But you never hear of Hank. I see one reference in that one book, Henry P. I never see anything else. And that guy was a powerhouse. Oh, I don't know that. It isn't necessary. I tell you the only thing that's the real necessity in that whole book is chapter 5. Now, a lot of that book was written, remember, that book was written in 1938. That's a long time ago. And a lot of water's gone over the dam since that time, and we've learned a lot of things. As the book says, we will hope to learn more. And it also says you may meet some of us on your happy road to destiny and all that stuff. This was written way back in 38, and we didn't have a whole lot of experience then, see? And in New York, they had less experience where most of this was written than we had in Akron, see? But we have learned a lot of things. But when you get right down to the nitty-gritty of this whole thing, the book originally was written for this one purpose, which at least they told us this, that we put it in book form, and it would reach people where we couldn't reach by word of mouth. So, figure that this book would be written, and some guy out here in Podunk out here somewhere would read the book and catch fire and start helping people. That's the purpose of the book. So that was what it was originally supposed to be. But we've learned a lot of things since then. I didn't do this kind of activity with people back in those old days. It was entirely different. I made them surrender, but I didn't have the whole thing down the way I have now. Over the years, I've learned some things, as we all do as time goes by. But actually, when you get down to analyze that big book, the main issue in that book is chapter 5. That tells you the whole story. That's the whole ball of wax. Because there's where you learn how to get your life changed. That's where you make your surrender, and that's where you learn to go out and do your missionary work. Yes, sir. I didn't start it. I hear a lot of stuff. Huh? I don't encourage that kind of stuff. Nobody accused me of that. I don't stand for that kind of nonsense at all. I'm a fundamentalist. I believe in what it says in that 5th chapter, and that's it, period. I believe in taking a person like yourself. If you need this and want it, I'll take you through this and teach you how to live. That's my job. And that's my mission here. But all this stuff that they've been putting into AA nowadays, forget it. So I say you better be very careful what intrusions are coming into our fellowship, because some of them are not the best things for us. Yes, sir. You have asked a very pointed question, and it is a good one. And I'll tell you this, you can't choose a sponsor. A sponsor should choose you. They've got that ass backwards, too. Yes, sir.
So what do you tell someone that's chosen him yet?
Nobody approaches him?
Nobody has chosen him as a sponsoree.
They haven't picked him?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with the setup in your group. The thing is, here's what it originally was meant to do, and we did this for a long time. But as I say, a lot of things change. You couldn't walk into one of the meetings where I used to go. In Cleveland, Ohio, you could not walk into a meeting. Nobody knew where they were in the first place. There's none of their business in the second place. And we didn't have all this crying about anonymity in the third place because we didn't need it. But you couldn't walk into a meeting. Someone had to bring you. Now, if I got your name, I'd go get in touch with you or get in touch with your wife and then get in touch with you, whatever. I would get you prepared for a meeting, and when you're ready for a meeting, I'd take you to a meeting. And then you would join that group, and I'm your sponsor. I teach you the program. people come in now, and this is absolutely the most asinine thing, one of the most asinine. Some guy will come in and say, get yourself a sponsor. How can that guy pick a sponsor? He's going to pick another dingbat like himself. He isn't going to get somebody that's going to be hard on him, that's going to teach him. He'll meet another flake. This is the fact. He doesn't know how to pick a sponsor. How is he going to do it? The poor guy's coming in there scared to death and defeated and in all kinds of trouble. He should pick out some guy to sponsor him. He might pick a Chinaman that don't even talk his language. Who knows? It's silly. When someone comes into your group meeting, somebody should nail that person and talk to them, see if they belong anywhere. If they don't, take them in charge. And if you don't have the time to sponsor him, find somebody for him. That's our job. This thing, the way people wander in and out of AA today, it's ridiculous. They yammer and squawk and squall about anonymity. Don't tell anybody below. But they open the meeting and let any dingbat walk in there. You can sit there and look the crowd over and find out who has a nuisance value, you know? It's crazy. You? What? Yes, sir. I hope she was good and ugly. But you're a handsome guy. But no, here's the thing. Some people cannot, being the emotional kind of people we are, a whole lot of people cannot do this sponsoring crossways. A man can't sponsor women or women men because of an emotional situation. But there are some people who can do that. They keep their eye on the spiritual instead of on the physical. And this is a problem that a lot of people have. They do all their spiritual work below their belt. And this can be But some people can rise above that, and of course, if some man hadn't, I tell you that frankly, I'm the guy that brought women into AA. Bill Wilson and Doc Smith wanted nothing to do with female AAs, female alcoholics. They had thumbs down. There was an awful double standard in those days, but I'm the guy that brought the first gals in. And it never hurt me, and I don't think I hurt any of them, and some of them managed to recover and are still going around and doing all right. But there's a very strong problem, very acute problem there that you can get mixed up in this girl-boy stuff, and that very often happens. In fact, a lot of people walk into AA looking for stuff like that. I'll never forget old Pop Green in Washington, D.C. Old man Green, Bill Green was his name. He used to be the major domo of that club, and everyone that came to that club, he interviewed them to find out if they belonged there, if they were alcoholics or what they're looking for. So this fellow, Bob Rathke, he and I run around every once in a while, and we just came back from a trip up to Virginia and Maryland and up through there. And when he came in 25 years ago, Bill interviewed him, and he was like this. Poor old Bob was in a bad shape, coming off an awful drunk, and he wanted help. So Bill talked it to him and qualified him enough to know that he's looking for something. So he gives him some fatherly advice. Old Bill Green was an older man. He was a real old guy. He was 70 years old. And he says to Bob, Bob, I want to tell you something. Lots of people come to this club. He says, some of these men are coming here to get sobriety, and some of these women are coming here to get sobriety. There are some men coming here to get women. There are some women coming here to get men. He says there's some men coming here to get men, and there's some women coming here to get women. He says, be careful who you associate with here, because you meet all kinds. I can't hear a word you say. Her sponsor's a man? Well, that's all right. Well, I think you should go through the steps and have something to carry, have a message to carry. There is no exact time limit to it, but it depends on what you have to give away. See, we are there to carry a message. I told you the other night, I talked about my efforts to get a message. It took me 7 months to get a message because The evidence of that is it took me 7 months to sell my first person this idea after talking to hundreds of people. But it depends. If you've gone through this program, if this person's gone through these steps and he is spiritually oriented, that's the time he can go out and sponsor. He may not, I think that any person starting out and doing 12-step work should go with someone else who's experienced, because there's things to learn about 12-step work. I think it's a matter of education. I don't think any person ought to go on a 12-step call alone. I don't care if you're a man or a woman, you should go double. You can get in an awful lot of problems going by yourself in AA things. Believe me, you can. Don't ask me, I'll tell you. Yes. Good for you. Two resentments and a pot of coffee and we start a new group. Well, I don't think you should resent that. I think there's a lot of literature that comes in AA meetings in some places I've seen that are better than some of that stuff that we have. Really. Fact of the matter, let me tell you this. I'm a little bit prejudiced, I must agree. We all have prejudices. I think we'd be dead if we didn't. But some time ago, our delegate, he's a pretty good guy. He's the smartest one we ever had. He's the only one that had any sense. And this guy came to me one day. He says, Clarence, I'm about to go to New York. He says, do you have any suggestions on what I might throw on the table up there? I said, yeah. I says, find out for me who writes this literature that you call literature. He says, what's the matter with it? I said, boy, I'm telling you, whoever writes this stuff must be having nightmares. I said, some of this stuff is awful. He said, like for instance, I said, we got a suitcase full of it there. Pull out your sponsorship pamphlet. I want to show you something. So he pulls it out, and I read on this pamphlet, this comes out of New York. This is Mecca talking. It's telling about what a sponsor should or shouldn't do. Now remember, this is a spiritually oriented program that's based on God, and He's the one that does the changing of our lives. It says there, a good sponsor who is an atheist, now get that one. How do you like them apples? How can a good sponsor be an atheist? A good sponsor who is an atheist will not try to convert people to atheism, neither will a person try to convert an atheist into any other belief. Now, what kind of stuff is that to put on an AA pamphlet? Somebody don't know their hind end from third base about what this program is, or they never put anything like that in a pamphlet. Don't get me started on that stuff. Yes, sir. If you want to get in touch with Grace or I about your steps, yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, you'd have to phone us and tell us, and we'd see if we are going to be in town. Don't call us this year, though, because we got so many commitments. I've been on the road now for about 5 or 6 weeks. If I get a new person, I usually turn them over to somebody I've sponsored. Well, we get people that have been around AA with various results, and they're not happy, they're miserable. And they come down and we teach them the program like I just went over. This is what we do with them. Well, you're not supposed to. You give them to somebody else. You can't sponsor all those people. You can't. You go crazy. You know, you turn them over to somebody else. Keep them all busy. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think of someone having more than one sponsor?
I don't think a thing of it. They shouldn't have. They should have one sponsor. I don't want anybody screwing up the people I'm sponsoring. I got a way of doing it, and I don't want anybody running them off the track. One sponsor, that's it. Yes, sir.
AA clubs, what do you think about that?
Well, there are some good clubs and there are some not so good clubs. We had a good club in our town and they threw us out of it. So, I don't know. Clubs are all right in their way, but here's what generally, if they use them properly, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them turn out to be a bums hangout and a loafers retreat, and they're a dating society and stuff like that. And they, if they're run properly, there are some good ones around the country, but a lot of them leave a lot to be desired. I don't think we need them so badly as probably once we did, because people can find things to do with their time without hanging around the club all the time. But some people want them. That's their option. They can have them if they want. Personally, I don't belong to any of them. Thank you. Well, anybody else want to start a fight? That's what we call unity. Yes, ma'am. You want to fight? How many people should sponsor a person at one time? Oh, I don't think you can handle more than one at a time. It takes an awful lot of time and takes a lot of praying. It takes a lot of work to handle a person and get his life turned around. I don't think you can. Yes. Hopefully, you make a lifelong commitment to a person. Hopefully. I have taken people to the program, and they have lived for many, 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 many years, and we are the closest of friends. I have also taken people through steps years and years ago who have nothing to do with me. A bunch of them voted me out of AA one time. That's when we had our first unity in Cleveland. We split in 3 groups, not 2. No, I think you form ordinarily, hopefully, you have a lifelong commitment and friendship with a person. You ought to have.
You mentioned that you should only person keep them all your life?
No, I don't keep them, but you keep an association with people.
Only one?
One person?
You said you can sponsor only one person at a time.
I can only sponsor, they're asking, we're talking about introducing them to the program and becoming their teacher. Yeah, you can't go ahead. We had to do otherwise one time. When they were coming in so fast, we had to teach them in classes. But it isn't necessary to do that now. There's plenty of people here that should be sponsoring someone, so everybody should be busy with somebody. But at one time when we only had a limited number of people there, and we were getting hundreds and hundreds of inquiries every week, we had to do something to absorb them. That's why we got those meetings going on, those training meetings we call them, where these men would come up to us and we teach them 100, 200 people in a group there. So we don't have to do that anymore. There's plenty of people here who ought to be busy sponsoring somebody, teaching someone. It's good for you as well as it is for the person. Yes, ma'am.
Clarence, I think you misunderstood me. You said that you should only sponsor one person at a time.
Yeah.
And it should be a lifelong relationship that some of them dislike and all that. Well, what you mean is guide them through the steps. Teach them through the steps one person at a time.
Right.
And then go on maybe to another. In other words, you can sponsor more than one person.
That's right. Because that person you're sponsoring has more bloody problems that you've got to help him with. Yes, who is over here? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to share something. Very much what you're talking about as far as sponsoring Alcoholics Anonymous. And their best candidate has been yours.
There you go. Somebody wasn't carrying the message, were they? You see, okay. Here's what I was going to say something, and I forgot what it was. It's old age. No, we are obliged to let people know. We are the only people that can let them know. Like I told you, Grace does. She tells everybody. If we go putting our candle under a bushel, nobody sees it. We got to go out and tell people. And there's plenty of people to be told. And you don't have to run to the jails and the nut houses to do it. Your prospects are in your own group. Your prospects are your next door neighbor. The prospects are the people you work with. They're all around. The prospects you sit next door to in church might be your own preacher. They're everywhere. So these are the people we look for. You don't have to look in the gutters for these people. They're all in their own gutters. We got to cut this off. He's pulling on my coat here. The rent's due. So something's wrong. I don't know what it is. I'm willing to stay till tomorrow, but some don't.
Your wife directed you.
I know she did. You listen to her. I don't.
Then you don't have to shut up.
Anybody else got one question before we close? Because we're going to close it up. But anyway, it's been a great being with you and visiting. We've enjoyed our trip here. We've enjoyed meeting you all. And I hope some of you come down to visit us sometime in Florida. A lot of you have our flyers there for our retreat Labor Day. Come on down. If you come, fly into Orlando and let us know when and what your flight number is, and someone will meet you there and take you to the retreat grounds. And you'll enjoy it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.